The leading cause of wrongful convictions in this country is eyewitness misidentification. Experts know that our memory can sometimes be notoriously unreliable.
And in a murder case on Buffalo's east side in the late 90s, the words of an eyewitness alone is what put a man in prison. But now, a nonprofit specializing in wrongful convictions is challenging her memory of the crime. 2 News' Danny Spiewak hears a convicted killer's pleas to clear his name.
The middle of the night was not the easiest time to find a killer. Memorial Day 1997 at the corner of East Delavan and Chelsea Place. 23-year-old Tamika Means was shot and killed in cold blood as she sat in the driver's seat of her red Alfa Romeo. It was payback in a road rage incident after her car got cut off by the shooter's car a few blocks back. The police never found the shooter's gun, never found the shooter's matching fingerprints, never found the shooter's car. They found no physical evidence. But they found Tamika's best friend, the lone witness who was sitting in the passenger seat, and she led the police to arrest this man.
God got his hands on me. It's time for me to get out of here. It's time for me to get out of here.
17 years ago, police hauled off Corey Epps in handcuffs with a paper bag over his head because the witness in the passenger seat said she saw him on Memorial Day of 1997 with a gun in his hand.
All right, we'll have you take a seat right here.
He is serving 25 to life in the Attica Correctional Facility for second-degree murder because of that identification. The joke is that everybody in prison is innocent, but it's not a joke to a nonprofit called the Exoneration Initiative.
Corey is undoubtedly innocent.
Rebecca Friedman is the assistant director of this New York City-based group, which specifically takes on cases without the luxury of DNA evidence. They're now pouring resources into investigating new evidence and trying to get Corey Epps out of prison.
Considering the way the human memory works and how easy it is to misidentify someone, it's problematic when there's no other evidence indicating guilt.
Well, I believe the truth is starting to come out. I wouldn't be sitting here right now if the truth wasn't starting to come out.
Even the judge had his doubts about the eyewitness. Documents from the sentencing show that he went on record in this case as saying eyewitness testimony in and of itself without corroboration is not the most satisfying of evidence that can be received in a courtroom. This is how Epps originally became implicated. The day after the murder, the witness worked with police to create this composite sketch from memory. A month went by, and then a relative of the victim said the sketch reminded her of Corey Epps. The witness had described the shooter to police as being 5'8" or 5'9" and having pimples on his face. Epps is well over 6 feet and has never had any pimples, but based on this comment from the relative, police put Epps' picture into a photo array and showed it to the witness in July of 1997. That's him. That's the guy who shot Tamika. I swear to God, that's him, the witness says when she sees Epps' picture. Epps then voluntarily stood in a live lineup in this very same room at the Buffalo Police Department. It is used sparingly these days and has sat empty since November, but back in 1997, it was where Epps would learn his fate.
I just was so nervous because it's just, you don't know what can happen.
The witness again picked him out, twice.
I just thought this was a procedure, and never came home, never came home and was lost in the system.
And the jury believed her when she testified against Epps, but those who understand eyewitness procedures and testimony believe she may have been mistaken.
It's very problematic to have a stranger picking a photograph and picking a stranger out of a lineup based on a fleeting encounter and then no other evidence. I mean, think about how many times you walk down the street and you see someone briefly and you can never identify them for any reason in the future.
And the witness admitted to police that she'd seen Epps' face before around town at the local bars.
She admitted that she had seen your face before.
Yeah.
Do you think that just by seeing a familiar face, maybe that's why she picked you?
When they gave her the thought, I think she just ran with it.
Dr. Mark Paoni is a criminal justice professor at Hilbert College. He spent more than 2 decades as a deputy in the Monroe County Sheriff's Department.
And that sketch, it was really pretty generic.
This is what the sketch looks like compared to Corey's mugshot. And the sketch was also based on a short encounter in the middle of the night when it was very dark, and she also told police in her statement that she'd had 4 alcoholic drinks at the time.
To have that amount of stress of seeing a life taken in front of you in a dark street when you might be next and you don't know what's coming on and it's dark and maybe I've had some alcohol, maybe I haven't, that's a lot of stress.
Our attempts to find this witness were unsuccessful, but a private investigator tells us that when he interviewed her a few years ago, she adamantly stood by her identification of Corey Epps. And this is also what several other police and legal sources involved in the case told us, that she never wavered in her belief.
Mistakes happen. You know, like I said, it's just that if you know a mistake happened, you should correct it.
Of all the people who lived in this neighborhood 17 years ago, police records show that only one person even reported hearing anything on the morning of the murder. That woman in the passenger seat was the lone witness to this crime, but if it had been investigated today, things may have been much different.
Consider this. In the case of Corey Epps, police records show that the detective who did the photo array knew who Epps was and then actually told the witness Epps' name after she picked him out. This contradicts the most important reform nowadays, something called the blind administrator, meaning a detective doing a lineup wouldn't know who the suspect was and couldn't give any unintentional verbal cues about who to pick. Buffalo police implemented it this past September.
As the years go by and the science changes, we certainly adapt. As I mentioned, we're in regular contact with the district attorney's office to see what can we do better to win cases, to make sure guilty people do go to jail, and quite frankly, to make sure innocent people do get out of jail.
The Exoneration Initiative took on Corey Epps' case because they doubted the identification, but that's not the only reason.
What got our attention was the post-conviction history of the case, which really pointed to an alternate perpetrator as having actually committed this crime.
Before the judge sentenced Corey Epps, his defense attorney received a mysterious letter from an anonymous person named Pumpkin. She said she knew who the real killer was, a cruel and heartless man that has to be stopped. This man is in prison right now for another murder.
I don't think it would have taken a whole lot of follow-up investigation in order to figure out who he was.
As part of an appeal, Pumpkin claimed that she told police that this other man had admitted to murdering Tamika Means, but police said they had no record of this conversation and the appeal was denied.
There's countless people in the world who would match that sketch. And in this case, Corey's case, a photograph of who we believe to be the actual perpetrator, you could see looks just as much like the composite sketch as Corey's photograph does, and actually looks strikingly like Corey.
A private investigator had met with the Means family as well, but our attempts to reach the victim's family by their listed phone numbers and addresses were unsuccessful.
Have you talked to them at all? Are they convinced of your guilt?
A lot of people believe if you get arrested, you did it. So I think they fall under that. And then, at the time, people want somebody to pay. You can't put somebody in jail on all costs to satisfy someone, And I want people to know, man, it's easy to get in jail, but it's hard to get out.
I contacted about a half dozen legal and police sources involved directly in the investigation and the trial. And, considering it's been 2 decades, a lot of them had kind of vague memories of actually what happened. But I did talk to the prosecuting attorney who says he remembers it was a hard-fought case. That was his recollection.
Yeah, wow, an incredible story. And I'll tell you, the stress that this witness must have been under that night, like you mentioned. And this is the only piece that she remembers is just her recollection of this individual.
And that's what a lot of the experts are looking at. And that's really why I think the Exoneration Initiative got involved.
Yeah, we hear these stories all the time that eyewitnesses, when they make those statements in court, juries believe them, right, even if the conditions are kind of shaky.
And we've learned a lot over the years.
And yeah, we'll continue to follow this for us, right?
Sure thing. Thank you, Danny.
Well, let's check in with Kevin. Kevin, the deep